Okay, so welcome everybody. This is Kathy Sipple, and we are talking about today going fishing for new business. And this is a topic I realize I wanted to do because I do training in Chicago periodically, and I just found myself always going to fishing analogies. And a lot of these people probably have never fished in their life, but I think conceptually we kind of get what it means to fish, whether you're a vegan and you don't eat fish and this is going to gross you out. Hopefully you can stick with the metaphor enough to see what I mean by it. Okay, so we're going to be talking about mindset, skills, environment, practice, and a couple other things, and then I'll give you a few clues as to future sessions that I think we could go deeper on this if you'd like. Okay. And if you have any questions, again, you can go ahead and put your question in the chat on the Zoom toolbar. I will address those at the end. We're going to be doing the slides. I'm going to ask Colleen to join in, do a demo, and then we'll open it up for questions. So mindset, this might be kind of a weird way to get started, but mindset in this case, obviously we're really talking about selling. We're not talking about fishing. But since we're going with the fishing analogy, I wanted to talk about this cool graphic that really helps me get centered on mindset. And what I want to introduce is the idea of something I'm going to call sacred selling, which, you might now be thinking, what the heck did I sign up for? Are we going to talk about selling? Isn't this about LinkedIn or, what is this? But I think that too many of us just think about sales, the whole sales process as being kind of like that schmarmy, used sales car guy or something like that, that they're trying to sell us something that we don't really need or that we really don't want. But the sacred selling, I think, happens when you consider, what have I got to offer? And just as equally, if not more, you're considering, what does the person that you wish to help, that you ultimately wish to, sell your services to, what do they need? And if there is no area of overlap, then you're probably not going to have a success, right? But if your mindset is really searching out that area of overlap, you get something that looks kind of like this. So, for those of you that are Christian, great. For those of you who aren't, think of it as a Venn diagram. I honestly kind of encountered this in some sacred symbology books, and it's just, upon meditation, really taken on great significance for me. It's the fish. A lot of people call it the Jesus fish, but it's also called just the Vescus Pisces. And so what I want you to do with this mindset is get into that zone, get into that fish zone of, what do I have to offer? And then what does my prospect need? And when you've got that overlap, you're in the zone, you're going fishing and you're ready to go. But when you consider yourself just to be in a different orbit, there's no chance of overlap, that's not really likely to bring you into the zone. Okay, so that mindset is very important in my opinion. Then the next thing obviously you need are some skills. And many of us that have our own business, we're really good at doing whatever it is that we do. Maybe we do marketing, or maybe we do websites, or we're graphic designer. Jennifer, I know, does like oils. Andrea does things that she sells on her Etsy store. We've got all different kinds of skills represented on this call. And we're good at that, but guess what? We also need to develop the skill to fish for prospects or to sell in this mindset. And so here's me with a fish. Again, vegans, I'm sorry, but I did eat this. I do enjoy fish. It's one of my favorite foods. And I was pretty proud this day when I caught this fish. This was a smallmouth bass. I'll tell you what, I would have never caught this fish if I hadn't learned so much from my husband. He's my favorite fishing partner. This was up in it's either in the UP of Michigan or northern Wisconsin. I can't remember exactly where this was taken. But in any case, I caught this fish. My husband didn't catch as many fish that day because he was the one who was busy powering the boat and, checking the lake conditions and kind of studying the maps. And all I had to do was sit there and catch fish. So he was, I guess, proud that the student caught the fish, but he was feeling a little bad that he didn't get as big a fish as me. But anyway, there's the skills that went into it. There's admitting that I needed to learn from somebody. If I just simply sat out there with a pole, didn't ask about how to do this, I would catch very few fewer fish on an outing than if I actually listen to somebody that's got a lot more years of experience. In this case, it just happens to be my husband. So environment, that kind of makes sense. What does this mean for what we're talking about today? Well, number one, you want to fish where the fish are, right? I mean, that kind of makes sense. You've probably heard this before. But where are the fish when we're talking about your prospects? Let's think about it. What does your fish ecosystem look like? Here's you, the circle is kind of representing you, but it's also representing a generic, pond or just kind of unidentified fishing hole. But what I have found more successful in real fishing and in life is that when you go into these little alcoves, you don't just consider, let's say in this case, the big network that you see in the lower right-hand corner. That's actually mapped relationships in LinkedIn. People kind of network in little clusters or in little groups. And guess what? Fish travel in schools and fish travel in, little alcoves. They don't want to just be hanging out there in the main, heavy waters. They kind of like to go deep into little shallow areas or off into a cove. They like their little structure. So when you think about how to really get to know your fish, you might benefit from not thinking of just being online or just being on LinkedIn, but rather think about LinkedIn groups or think about how you can kind of approach the fish in their little, area and get them comfortable with you without scaring them. You don't want to make a lot of noise. Maybe you want to observe first. So the other cool thing that is more true on LinkedIn than it is in life is fish are actively looking for you. In the sales analogy that I'm going with, there are a lot of fish in the sea that you could be working with that you can find and that can also potentially find you. So these are the latest updates that I could find from LinkedIn. There are 467 million users. That's already 6 months or so old. Number of new LinkedIn users per second is 2. That seems pretty incredible to me. LinkedIn's reported user total goal is 3 billion. And the number of total LinkedIn users in the US is 128 million. So when we say there are a lot of fish in the sea, we're not kidding. Those are a lot of potential, prospects for us. And guess what? We're somebody else's fish too. Hopefully, if I can keep Austin around until we get to this example, I want to say how Austin and I connected. I was actually one of his fish. And if he can give me a firsthand accounting of how that happened, that would be kind of cool. Let me go a little deeper first. So fish, if they're going to be finding you, this is almost more akin to ice fishing, in my opinion. And in marketing speak, it's called inbound marketing. So it's not interruptive marketing where you, the marketer, are necessarily going after the fish, although that's great too. First, we want to make sure we take care of the easiest things that you can do. So you can be the laziest fisherman that you can possibly be. If you can get the fish to come to you, that's quite possible. To do that, you've really got to consider, what do the fish want? So how do you do that? How do you think like a fish? Well, using the right bait is pretty important. And so again, on this LinkedIn analogy, what the fish want is they want to kind of know who you are a little bit. This is not an exhaustive checklist of what makes a great profile, but LinkedIn users with at least 5 skills listed on their profile receive up to 17 times more profile reviews. So just be kind of looking at your own LinkedIn profile if you wish, while we're doing this, or you can, make a checklist and do this later. Adding a photo to your profile makes you 36 more times likely to receive a message, and with photo, 21 more times likely to get a view. LinkedIn profile photos get 36 times more messages. I think I said that. No. Okay, that's interesting. 36 times is the photo. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on. I think I've got that twice. Okay, so there are all kinds of things that you can do to make yourselves like shinier, more attractive, and more yummy to people who might be looking for you. So are people really looking for you on LinkedIn? That's a question I get all the time, and people kind of doubt that that happens. Well, yes, they are. When you think about how you search for information online, I mean, how do many of us search for it? You're probably Googling to start, if you're just trying to become aware about a problem that you need to solve as a buyer. But Google kind of feels like the ocean. It doesn't feel like a little nook, right? Usually people want a little bit more context. When you get the first results on Google, it's often just the companies that are spending money on AdWords, or they know their way around the SEO game, and they kind of rank higher than somebody that might actually have your back or have your right result or your right solution. So a lot of people, once they're done with that initial understanding of what it is they need to solve their problem, they actually do go into LinkedIn because they want to get not a nameless, faceless company that's going to present a solution, but really to know who it is on the other end of the line that they're going to be working with. So one thing you can do, here's a free tool that you can use to think like your own fish, is to go to a relatively new tool that HubSpot offers. They're one of my favorite resources for learning inbound marketing. I don't get paid by HubSpot to say this, but they have a free inbound marketing certification course that you can take. If you really want to go deep into the subject, I think it's a great course to do. You can do it all online, self-paced, and it is completely free. I have done that again recently, and that's when I found that they added this tool. So anyway, okay, so make my persona. What does that mean, and how does that relate to a fish? What that means is that instead of saying, gosh, I like to help, people that are women 25 to 50 and that live in the Midwest, you're actually going to name your fish. You're going to name your prospect. So you're going to say, I'm trying to reach Susie, who lives in, Madison, Wisconsin, and she is a life coach, and she works with people who do this, that, and the other thing. She's been out of her, business for a year. She's still in the startup phase. Here's what she might be likely to need. Here's what she might be, I'm going to say Googling, but basically shouting out into the internet to look at a problem that she needs to be solved. So guess what? For you to think like your fish, it's really worth you understanding what their challenges are, what the demands are on their time, what it is that they need in their next stage of development. And if you can anticipate that, and you can with integrity include that in your own LinkedIn profile, then that's going to be a really interesting little nugget that your fish is not going to be able to resist nibbling and checking out if there's a connection, going back to that area of overlap. If there's not a connection, you can't force it. You can't bait the hook and then, not have the thing to actually offer, right? That doesn't make any sense. That's not going to be a win for anybody. But make sure that you're putting together a nice, juicy profile on your LinkedIn. It costs you nothing to do that, and you're going to be much more attractive to your fish if you flush that out. And also up front, ahead of that, think like your client that you're trying to reach. And one other thing you might want to consider is use the words that they use. I think so many times when we're putting together our own stuff, we just use a lot of jargon, or we use, industry terms that we know exactly what they are, but somebody that needs to find us does not know. So a great way that you can test out your persona and test out your own profile is simply to get, somebody that's a little bit close to you, who has worked with you before, to look at your profile and see if it makes sense to them, see if it resonates with them. All right, so I'd like to see if I can tap my live demo person here today. Colleen, can you hear me okay? And can you?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So you still game for this?
Yeah.
Okay, so while I am bringing up LinkedIn, Colleen, can you tell me, or tell everybody that's on the call, a little bit about who is your ideal client and what they might be looking for from you? What is it that you could offer that client?
Okay, so I help the people in the community learn more about interacting with people with disabilities. And that can be through parent training, that can be through, I've done workshops for the librarians or for the school bus drivers and all these people who might not have that kind of educational background on working with kids with disabilities, but are working with them every day anyway. And so informing the community about disabilities and how to set up your environment so that it is least offensive to a variety of disabilities. And then once we've got everybody on the same page, I do workshops about how to address challenging behaviors and how to I have a lot of different behavioral background certifications, and my most favorite one is yoga. And so I take yoga and ABA therapy and a psychology background and an education background and blend them all together to try and help kids who are struggling with, different challenging behaviors and families who are struggling with that. So my ideal person is just about anybody who will listen to me talk, really.
And you know what? I think that goes back to that same mindset that a lot of people get, is just like, I'm trying to reach anybody, vanilla, we don't put a face to that fish. And so I know it's hard to go specific, but if you trust me on this little fishing expedition, it usually does work out a little better.
Okay.
Because if we're too vanilla, we're too generic, and we just say, hey, we're talking to anybody who's willing to listen, that message is not likely to be all that juicy, because those different audiences, family members, medical community, people that actually have disabilities, they might come to your message in a slightly different way. Would that, do you see how that could be accurate?
Yep.
Okay. So if we pick one of those, like on this exact, little fishing expedition, this doesn't mean this is all that we're ever going to fish for. But if you just think of it as an expedition or a campaign, because I do talk about Facebook ads a lot too. We're not talking about Facebook ads today, but any kind of online ads, it's the same principle. If you put out a generic message, you get kind of generic results. But, think about when you've been online and you see an ad that pops up. If you're on Facebook, hopefully you've had this experience where you're like, oh my gosh, I love that outfit, or oh my gosh, that's exactly.
How do they know?
Yeah. How do they know? Yeah. And so there's some expert fishermen that are trying to get to know their fish, and they've done some advanced work to figure you out. And so they've served up content. We're going to get into content in a whole different segment, not today. But today we're just talking about the things that we can do that can attract people to you, and how we can, use that same idea or that same logic to kind of reverse engineer and go the other way. So let's just think about one of those people that would be your ideal client. So can you give me one example?
Let's look at parents of children with disabilities.
Okay. And we probably should say that we did not rehearse this too much, or else I would have probably steered you in another direction. But one thing I'm going to go back to is, on a previous slide, we said, environment, and kind of, we've got to sort of know what fish are in the lake, right? And so on LinkedIn, this is pretty much a lake, a fishing hole that's about how people identify with their professional selves versus their parenting selves. So those fish might be here. They are probably here. Probably many people on LinkedIn are also parents, but that information is not necessarily the type of information that they're sharing. So they might be here, but they're going to be buried way deep in the weeds and really hard for us to find.
Okay.
So if we could pick one of those audiences that actually had a professional designation, they were, So like you'd mentioned, you really like to do yoga, right?
I do.
And so if you were trying to do more yoga in your community, what would be a good person to reach out to who could, help you make that happen?
Well, I would like to do, so I'm doing a lot of just regular yoga. I would like to do more therapeutic yoga. So like reaching out to maybe the healthcare professionals and big mental health providers in town.
Okay. And we should say you're in Mishawaka.
I am in Mishawaka.
Yeah. And so they have changed quite a bit on LinkedIn. They're making it a little bit trickier for their advanced search. It used to be just a delight to use. And now I'm still kind of getting a little bit used to it. You can filter, by locations over here. You can filter by, keywords over here. Let's just go, we can also do industries. So you said health, is that right?
Healthcare, yeah, and
Health,
yeah,
wellness, and fitness, would that be good?
yeah, let's try that.
Okay. And bear in mind, we're using my network, not yours. So these results might not be quite as solid as they would be if those are the people that you're actually trying to, get with. Okay, let's see, where else can we go? We're going to go, South Bend is kind of the biggest area right outside. Okay, so let's just go ahead and we're going to put in South Bend since that would be your metropolitan area. And since I'm already just down to 69 results, I'm going to go ahead and say, that's not too bad. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to kind of go both ways on this. Remember, we're looking at how can you proactively go fishing and go find the people that you want to get introduced to. But bear in mind that fish are also looking for you.
Right.
So there could very well be right now, today, somebody in South Bend that's saying, where could we get, a yoga instructor who works with, kids that have developmental disabilities or with autism or whatever, so you want to make sure that you've got those keywords, that bait inserted into your profile so they can find you if the search is going the other way. Otherwise, all those millions or even billions of fish don't help us at all if we can't find one another, right? So I see a couple of second level contacts for me. All other things being equal, I'd probably start with people that are closest to me. And if everybody doesn't understand what a second level connection is, I'll kind of go through that very quickly. It means that we've got shared connections. We've got multiple people in most of these cases that connect us. So Dorota Janik, never heard of her, don't know her, but we have 33 shared connections. I don't know the exact specifics of LinkedIn's algorithm, but I've been told that the way you kind of get to the top of the heap is by using those keywords more often. If you just have yoga mentioned one time, for instance, and there was somebody else that had it mentioned 4 or 5 times in their profile, all other things being equal, they would show up ahead of you because it just shows that you're more intentional, you're more focused about yoga, right? Okay. So we haven't actually put in any keywords yet, so we could actually try that. But this is a small enough sample size. I just want to kind of go through and say, what would make you fish for one person versus another? Certainly you could put in job title, that could help. Somebody that's got a professional headline, like Cindy Cohen. I thought we were first level connections, actually. Maybe just on Facebook, but she's got a pretty nice professional headline: wellness consultant, certified health coach, author, national speaker. And, she's kind of rounded it out a little bit. That's really like your first flash of insight to see, does that sound like a welcome mat to who this person is and how, it's going to be my decision a little bit, or at least a big part of it, as to whether I click on her, find out more about her, and think that she's a viable solution for me. I see far too many people that just call themselves something really vanilla or generic, like account manager. They just accepted the status quo that LinkedIn will, put in there if they just enter whatever is on their business card or something like that. But you've actually got a lot of opportunity to become bold with that. And we're not going to take care of all of that in this particular session. That'll be a different session. But basically, you just go into profile, edit profile, and there are all kinds of different things that you can test. So Colleen, I'm just going to ask you to pick, because we're obviously not going to look at 69, but just, quick scan. Let me know which of these, if any, appeal to you, just based on what you can see.
Oh, Andrea. Let's go back up to the chiropractor.
Okay, so chiropractor, you feel like it just by nature of him being a chiropractor, that would be potentially a good fit, and somebody that I'm not normally connected with. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and click on that. And so now he's got us over, over the edge with the welcome mat. he's lucky just because you're interested in a chiropractor and there weren't a whole lot coming up on top.
Yeah.
So he got the look. If you're in a really competitive industry where, you know, there are tons of you out there, like let's say you're a coach of some kind and you work with people all over the place, you can imagine that ocean is really big. So you've got to be a bit more specific. If you're talking about people that you want to do business with face to face, you know, going to their brick and mortar location, just by limiting the geography, obviously you're going to have a little bit smaller, you know, fishing hole to work with. But the next thing I typically look at after I have identified the who it is that I'm going to check out is I look at their summary. Now he's got a really basic small summary, just saying, you know, where he is, how long he's been in business, voted favorite chiropractic office for these particular cities, specialties. Not bad, but I'd say really the only thing he's got going for this is he's mentioned his service area and he's mentioned his specialties. Mm-hmm. You've actually got a lot more real estate there where you can develop your story. And so he kind of got lucky. You know, you would probably reach out to him just based on this. But if I can give you guys another example, and Austin, let me see if Austin's still with us. Do you mind, Colleen, if I step away from this for just 1 second and show you?
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to unmute Austin here for a minute because he fished me. Austin, do you have audio now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So can I go ahead and put out the quote unquote bait that you got me with the other day?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. And we didn't really rehearse this a whole heck of a lot, but Austin, I believe that we couldn't even figure out how we connected to one another. He happens to do crowdfunding and all kinds of very interesting things. Based on his professional headline, I sure didn't know that, but it was everything but vanilla. You can see right at the top of my message that professional headline shows up not only on search results, but also every time you message somebody. So he identified himself in that space as a freelance author, astrologer, tarot reader, and musician. And he gave me, you know, a very nice message that wasn't scary to me at all. It was, you know, he sneaked up on this fish in a very nice way, just saying hello, let me know if you need any help with original music, tarot, astrology readings, smiley face icon, have a good day, best, Austin. So Austin, is that something that you try very frequently, or how did you go about picking me out of the many people that you're connected to?
You know, I just kind of look at general interests and things like that. And then sometimes, you know, demographics, like my audience is mostly women. So unless a guy's in a, you know, non-traditional role for some reason, then sometimes I'll message a guy, but, you know, it just has to be a different type. But to do what I do, guys don't like to take advice from other guys. It's just kind of a machismo thing from my experience. So, you know what I mean? So anyway, but yeah, a little bit of that and just a little bit of just seeing who's out there. You know, I hadn't really revisited my LinkedIn list in a long time, so it's kind of like house cleaning for me. I had no idea I even had 1,000 people. Like I knew the last check I had like 700, so I don't even know where the last 250 they're there.
Yeah, well, and again, I can't remember exactly why we connected because I don't believe we'd ever spoken, you know, voice to voice before. But I swear, I think he must be part psychic or something because I don't know that I've ever paid for a tarot card reading. I probably have, you know, done something similar to that before. And I'm definitely, you know, open to that. So I don't think that was at all revealed in my LinkedIn, although I think I did say I was a Reiki master. So maybe that's one of your keywords you look for. Who knows? But I thought that was so interesting. But if he only had that professional headline going for him, it definitely wouldn't have been a sale. When I clicked on his profile, this is where I got really interested because it's like not only is he an astrologer, but he also identified himself as a bootstrapping expert. So it seemed like he was really much more about, he's got, you know, as a cutting edge life coach and startup analyst, I've successfully helped over 300 clients deepen their understanding of their lives and their vocational, emotional, and spiritual purpose. Having bootstrapped 7 businesses to profitability, I have a unique understanding of how to find fulfillment in vocational life. I really like how he's got this readable list of things. Clients I typically work with are, Just pro tip, you can do bullet points even in Microsoft Word and paste those in over here on LinkedIn. There is no formatting native to LinkedIn, but the way he's got it is perfectly great. It's perfectly fine, easy to read. You can pack many more keywords in when you just do this kind of a list type thing. But in scanning this, I just saw that he wants to do the same thing for people that I want to do. I mean, that's why I built CoThrive, was to help people do exactly what he's got in his first, paragraph. So I immediately felt like, wow, this guy is fishing in the right zone. I don't know how he knows, but it's like he was reading my brain. So instead of him scaring me at all, I probably scared him, because it was like, okay, how much is it? Right now, let's talk. We ended up talking, I think, was it within the hour?
Yeah, we talked, about an hour and change.
Yeah, but I think like within the hour after I messaged you back.
First time on. Yeah, we definitely.
I was like, how do I set up an appointment? How much does it cost? I mean, I just, it was after I read his summary, honestly, that I was pretty sold. I think I went to the summary, and then I believe I went to his book link. So I bought your book even before I called you, I believe, or before I messaged you. And I received this book in the mail just today, as a matter of fact. So we just connected for the first time Monday. I bought his book. I bought another, what was the other thing that you have? I think you have an ebook that was yet something else. But I am really, really looking forward to this, because it's exactly what I wanted to do. So I don't know that we can all do a repeat performance on Austin, because he probably has some unfair advantages being a tarot card reader. Maybe he is part psychic. But the things that he does well that I think we can all model is just to make it super clear, hey, these are the people that I usually work with. And what did he try to do? He probably used some words that he was relatively sure that his prospect, might be looking for. So I don't know. Anything else, Austin? I mean, how do you typically, how does your profile work for you, or how has your LinkedIn success been?
Well, the profile is good. I think that, with regards to messaging, it's just short and sweet. You just want people to respond and create like happy dialogue between two people. And I think that once the ice is broken, everything is cool, but if you can't get them to try and break the ice, then, you know what I mean? You're kind of, it's an uphill battle, because you're going up against a lot of different marketers, and so you don't want to seem like the other marketers.
Yeah.
That would be my
Exactly. I think a key way that I might describe what you just said is like putting the social back in social media. So many times people just think, I'll just post. And they post. But they're never actually trying to discover who anybody else is or talk to them. They're more like fly fishing. Like, let me just cast out some content. Let me just say what I'm about. Let me see what I'm about. But for him to have found me, I really felt like somehow he was able to, intuit what I was, really needing and wanting at that very time. And I'll just give him props. If anybody is open to this, I was just kind of blown away by how very specific advice that he led me to. So while you might not think of, tarot or astrology as being particularly business orientation, he's got a very unique hybrid that actually guided me to a very, business centered resource. It wasn't like all kind of airy-fairy stuff. So I just thought that was delightful. Certainly, it's not all about just the summary. You've got all kinds of other areas down here that if you've gotten somebody that far, they may want to check your other areas. So if you go down to experience, certainly you want to be thorough, fill that in. I think he did a really nice job of all of these. He filled in, very, very completely the life coaching by Austin. This is another great place where you can actually, from a technical standpoint, you can do some keyword packing that doesn't make it look like keyword packing. because you can say crowdfunding again, you can put in ghostwriting, you can put in all those keywords that you put in the summary. And because of LinkedIn's algorithm, making this more heavily weighted than somebody that just said it once, it actually does help you, in those search results as well. So thank you, Austin. I really appreciate you stepping up and being a part of that. And I hope that we're going to be able to bring him to some kind of a future webinar. I also just love the beautiful graphic that he's got behind his, his profile. I think that's kind of nice. He's just treated it very artistically, and the imagery really spoke to me. Okay, well, thank you. Okay, anything else, Austin, or otherwise I'm going to go back to Colleen and go from there.
No, go for it. Thank you, guys. I might have to jump here, but it was a total pleasure talking with you. And if you all have any questions, I'm sure feel free to email me or whatever, and I'm happy to help.
Sounds
Thanks
great.
so much.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
All right.
Okay, so anyway, it's kind of rare, quite honestly, that I am, impressionable and that I bite on these things, but I just felt, again, we had a really fat fish zone and I had to talk to him. It was irresistible. So I could probably make my own be a bit more irresistible. You know what? I'm open to feedback from you guys, because frankly, there's nobody who can tell you better who you are than the people who derive benefit from what it is that you do. So right now, looking at mine, I kind of almost feel like it's a little blah, or it's a little too businessy. It doesn't totally embrace kind of my spiritual side or my organic, earth-centered kind of side. So I'll tell you what, I would really value getting a profile review from one of the CoThrive members, and people that are in the CoThrive Time Bank. This is something that we can earn hours for, by honoring each other with our time and our feedback. We can do this without exchanging dollars, and piece by piece, bit by bit, we can all have, better, stronger profiles that are more authentically us. Because, just like a fish is in water and they can't see the water that's there, it's really hard for us to sometimes know about, how people see us or what value we're adding, because I think some of the things that we do the most easily and naturally are not things that we think about to tell anybody. So, telling people in your summary is one way. And then other ways that we can help each other out is actually to, give testimonials called recommendations on LinkedIn that have your testimonial is just attached forevermore and becomes part of that person's profile. So featured skills and endorsements are different than recommendations. Those are also helpful, but they're a little bit more lightweight. I would say those I'm only looking at to determine who to work with if I'm really in a competitive, industry or situation where I need, final determination. For instance, I would imagine if somebody was going to hire me as a social media marketing trainer and nobody, or just, maybe two people had said I was good at social media marketing, it might give you a pause. Like, if she's so great at it and she's doing it all over the place, then why would more people have not said she was good at it? So I feel like I'm getting all biblical here today, but it's kind of like, who do you say I am? It's not about who do I say I am, but this marketing recommendations and the featured skills and endorsements is a great way for other people to say how they see you. So, think about who you can do that for, and you actually will win. You'll become more visible to the fish in their ocean because, let's think about it. Sarah gave me a recommendation and now she's permanently attached to my profile. She was an intern of mine, many years ago. And if somebody's visiting my profile, they actually have a portal to learn more about her. So when you're giving, you're actually a little bit receiving as well, which I kind of like. So anyhow, let's go back to Colleen though. Colleen, can we pretend now that we're the chiropractor that's looking for you?
All right.
So I'm thinking I would probably put in yoga, autism, and maybe South Bend. Maybe I don't know. I could be that lucky to find you right in Mishawaka if I'm in Mishawaka. And good news, look at that. Look at that. There you are right at the top. But also look at this. You're not the only one. Wouldn't you think that you were the only one that would have all those very specific, results? But there were actually 15, so even in a what's called long tail keyword, if
Oh,
you're,
but they're not in my area. Do you see the ones in Washington and Chicago?
oh, okay. You know what? Maybe they just mentioned South Bend in their,
Mm-hmm.
like maybe they went to school in South Bend, or they had at some
Like
point
Notre
worked in
Dame?
South Bend. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Good. So, there are ways that you can kind of narrow that focus, but great news. I mean, you're showing up. So that's obviously
Cool.
perfect. So this is something that we can all do for free to make sure that we're findable to our fish when they decide they're hungry and they want to come looking for us. This is not a one-off thing that you do one time and say, I'm done now. You probably want to revisit this exercise maybe quarterly, or at least, twice a year, something like that. Just freshen up your profile and see if you can add new keywords. If you've gotten a new certification, or you got a new skill that's going to be really important to you, or even if you want to highlight some parts of your skill set and perhaps downplay other parts, just make sure that's reflected accurately, in your profile. It doesn't mean you have to suppress everything you've ever done that's not related, but it just means look focused, tell your story in that summary to explain why you're the perfect fill in the blank for that person that's looking for you. So I hope that makes sense. I have just found this to be abundantly valuable to me, and I'm just really grateful that even since Microsoft acquired LinkedIn, that it's still free for the basic LinkedIn. And I have the free LinkedIn version. I do not have a paid, even though I teach it and train with it. I kind of like to take it to the max and make sure I know what people can still do for free. At some point, I may decide to bite on the professional level, but it's doing for me what I need it to do right now. So any questions about that? Or Colleen, do you see how you could?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
So again, some tips: if you're going out on a fishing expedition, it really is helpful to not be looking for everybody at once, because in looking for everybody, you sometimes can't see, the very, very good gift that's right in front of you, because you're so busy looking for volume, you can't see this, the specificity. So, what I really like to do and what I found the most valuable is just to sit down and kind of schedule these little fishing expeditions and discipline myself to look for one thing, at a time. So I hope that was helpful for you. Anything else from you, Colleen, that you'd like to share?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, hey, thanks again for being being my guinea pig, as it were.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. More from Colleen soon, we hope. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the slide deck here for a second and show you what else I've got for you. Okay. That was our live demo. Great. And she did wonderfully. So let's all give her a hand. All right, so what do I offer you guys by way of, helping you with your fishing expedition? Well, I mentioned right on my LinkedIn profile that I do training in Chicago. I actually teach, Fortune 500 companies how to maximize their own LinkedIn use, how to use LinkedIn for recruiting, how to use it for selling. They're not typically going into these one-on-one relationships. They are, just by their scale and the nature of the corporate brands, using this on a different level. What I really enjoy, though, and what makes my heart happy, is to do these one-off connections, because how much fish do we really need? I mean, that would make a huge dinner, right, if you landed this big fish. And I guess in this slide, I'm going to say you can call me Al, right? If you remember that song from Paul Simon, Call Me Al. I don't know why that came into my mind, but this guy's name is Al. He's a fishing guide. And my husband, he's a great fisherman, and he's taught me to fish, but guess who taught him? Al. So I've kind of learned from Al. We got to keep, going for that higher and higher knowledge. Like Al's got more experience than probably anybody, because that's what he does 24/7, 365. He's a fishing guide. So, we've stayed in Al's cabin. We've fished on Al's boat. We've watched how Al does things. And guess what? On those days when we go out with Al, we catch more fish, and we usually catch bigger fish. And we learn skills that help us go fishing on our own as well. So that's, I guess, what I hope to bring to you, is just an experienced fishing guide. And this is something that we can do together in the Co-Thrive Collective office hours. I want to set up certain times where it's not just me fishing, on your behalf, but where we set aside, the very first thing I said is the mindset. So where we kind of like get in the right mindset that we do have something helpful to offer people. We get a very clear focus on who it is that we're trying to reach during this particular fishing expedition. And then we have that accountability. We go out on a boat ride together, virtual boat ride together, but we all set aside that particular hour, however, length the time, the fishing time will be. And we try to get results. We try to bring in enough fish that's going to make us happy, healthy, and hopefully not hungry. So some future sessions, just to kind of give you an idea, I thought at first I could put this all into one hour segment, and it was just way too much. But once I started playing with this fishing analogy, I realized that the tackle box, where you keep all your bait, that's really your content marketing archive, So I want to do a whole session based on that. That buyer persona, that's really getting to know your fish. We could call that fish psychology, but I think that's worthy of its own session. Fish calendar, you can't fish all year round for every kind of fish. There's just different kinds. And so there's a seasonality to your fishing, your prospecting, and in kind of looking at the buying habits, looking at how you can identify those habits and plotting that out, making adjustments. That was another one. Some more too that I'm not completely, remembering right at this moment. But just know that there is more coming, and I definitely would like to share this with more people so that we can all be more profitable and share in the abundance. So I don't know if you saw it on my LinkedIn profile, but I kind of built my profile around sustainability, because I'd say for my earth care life and for my marketing life, that's really what unifies everything that I do. Is I want to use the least amount of energy that I can use to get the best result. And I don't want to overfish. I don't want to take anything more than what I actually need. So to keep me sustainable, I do need to admit that, every now and then, hey, I need some inputs. I need financial fertilizer, financial food, to keep me alive. So I'm going to be tapping people on this call to spread the word and hopefully invite others to this basic intro and to future fishing expeditions, because I feel like if we go by these Co-Thrive principles, that we're all going to have more, right? So just a few that I thought particularly related to what we talked about today is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I mean, it's certainly faster for anybody to jump onto their own little fishing session, or just everybody doing their own thing in their little silos that doesn't require any coordination. But I feel like if we're kind of doing this in a nuanced, intentional way, weaving our networks together a little bit and even cross-referring or helping each other out, we're all going to go much further. There are going to be times when you encounter a lead that does you no good. It's not in your fish zone. Sometimes it's appropriate just catch and release. If you can't help that person, then you certainly don't want to masquerade as somebody who could and have that go badly for you. But if we're following the first principle by working together, can you look around in the tribe and say, hey, I just met this great new contact. Maybe this would be a great person for Austin to meet, or maybe this would be a great person for Colleen to meet, or for Charlotte, or for Jennifer. Like, let's look at feeding each other our abundance before we release and throw them back. Okay, so think about if everybody was fishing to help everybody else instead of just feeding themselves. I think that's like a beautiful vision. It's aspirational, frankly, at this point. But how we're going to get there, you can support, this project. And thank you to the members who are already on this call. There is a thing called Co-Thrive Collective for Business. And those members do own their own business. They have a revenue stream. They are trying to live by those principles. And you can learn about that membership at cothrive.org, going to the memberships tab to find out how to join. I think it's extremely affordable. It's just $30 a month to be part of that group. And, just to give you an idea, my hourly rate that I charge, it's posted on my website, is 5 times that amount. And that's for 1 hour. Okay. And this is $30 for an entire month of, training, interaction, all kinds of different things. And then something I'm excited that we released in 2016 is the Co-Thrive Time Bank. So members in the Time Bank don't necessarily have to have their own business, but they are supporting the time bank with a very nominal yearly fee, or excuse me, yearly donation of $25. And what that allows them to do is to trade time and services with other people in the time bank. So I would really encourage everybody in the collective to become members of the time bank, because that just kind of gives you an excuse to get together, work together more creatively without having to always, open the checkbook and write a check. So that's a way that we can do it. We're going to be doing an orientation here pretty soon for new members, and we can share that. So anyway, that's all I've got. I want to go ahead and open it up for questions from you guys. And I just love to hear, well, I'm getting a little feedback. So I'm going to mute myself and just see if anybody else would like to talk.
Well, I guess the only question I had was if you have a contact reach, or what is the next step as far as when you're talking to someone, if you're trying to reach out to someone, do you have like a letter format that you use to kind of start that dialogue?
Great question, Scott. I think Austin gave us a really good example. I mean, obviously that's in his own style. Hang on just a second. I'm going to try to mute everybody and then just unmute me. Sorry about that. I didn't really want to mute everybody, but I was getting too much feedback. So just put a note in chat if you want me to unmute you. I don't like to mute you guys, but it's just bad feedback with too many people on the call. So yes, Scott, short answer to that is I do have some suggested language for people that aren't really sure how to get the ball rolling. I think doing something that really is in your own style and your own, voice, something that you'd feel comfortable saying is definitely good. Some things I heard Austin say was just, keep it short, super short and just casual, friendly. I think all of those things are really important and served him well in that example that we shared. Thank you for that question. Let me go ahead and unmute you again, Scott. Did that answer your question?
Right. I'm just trying to figure out, if you do find a good match, what the next step would be, and certainly just keeping it kind of like a real general introduction of, your selective features you're trying to target, and then just, leave it open as if they need any help, give me a call.
Yeah. And so, you know what, we will put that answer in the extended version into a future session. And I think maybe that would belong with, designing the perfect fishing expedition. Here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to go on an outing where we've got, kind of going back to some of the principles that we just talked about, you wouldn't use the same generic bait for everybody, right?
Right.
So what you say to them really should be a measure of what you think they want, what, as much as you can intuit about what they need from you, I would try to be very, very targeted. It's not really about you at that point. You're kind of trying to strike in the fish zone and find, something that's of mutual interest. So,
okay.
So how do you determine that? It really is going to be doing a little bit of search and then, scanning something about them and then making some, some conjecture about what it is that you think that you can offer them based on what you see. If you don't want to be that intentional, obviously you don't have to. But, it's just like, how many fish does anybody really, really need to feed themselves? Probably not that many. So if we just slow down a little bit and concentrate on what we're doing, talk to fewer fish, and I hope this is not really insulting to keep calling people fish, but hopefully you guys get it. We don't need to be mass marketers. We just need to talk to the people that can actually do business with us and that we think would really want to do business with us. And so after we start putting the social back in social media, I think the what to say comes much more naturally. Like you could say, just for instance, I see that we're both in this group, or I see that we both have, Andrea as a connection. And, any friend of Andrea's is probably somebody I would like to know as well. Or based on your interest in such and such area, I wondered if you taking a look at this project I'm working on would be something that, would be of interest. Um, there's a whole other technique about setting times and sort of the technology of taking it into the next step, which I think is going to just be too much for today. But you are on target that you do need a plan for that next step.
And a lot, I think it seems to be that so much is timing. If you can reach that person at the time that they're either thinking about or have that need, then your message is the most effective.
Right. And can you give me an example, Scott, of maybe somebody that you would be looking for who would need your services?
Not particularly. I think it's something that's been asked of me where, people say, well, do you do video? And it's the thing that I don't do video, but, if I could recommend someone, that would be good. And then potentially that might come back to me down the line.
Right. And, I've got some pretty juicy bits about answering that question that I'm not really prepared to reveal at this time, but it's a mechanism by which you bring that fish into the boat, with the sharing the abundance kind of thing. And instead of you just being a nice guy and sharing that lead, I'm trying to kind of structure it so that members could be financially rewarded when you bring in, a piece of business to the collective, so that we could, actually fish like in a big boat together. And I think we could fish a whole lot more effectively there. But that's definitely a topic for another day. I'm not quite completely at the level of developing it. If anybody else has an example that they'd like to try, just, what would be an appropriate thing. I'm going to try just unmuting various people and see what I can find. Jennifer, I haven't talked to you in about a million years.
I am so far behind the curve because I have not embraced the whole LinkedIn thing, and I have the professional job part, and then I have, my oil stuff that I do. And so I don't know how to represent both, or do I just do one, or, so I don't know. I think I was trying to even upload a photo and I couldn't do it the other day. So I'm embracing the technology, but very slowly.
Okay. Well, if I can just quickly answer that, I mean, you're a hybrid fish, right? You do both things. So what you don't want to do is develop two different LinkedIn personas, because that's definitely against the LinkedIn terms and conditions.
Okay.
Definitely don't do that. But I think that a lot of people that are attracted to CoThrive do happen to have multiple gifts, varied gifts, and do interesting things that aren't, cookie cutter. Like,
right.
Let's think about Austin. I mean, he's a crowdfunding expert that's actually written a really cool book about it, and he does tarot and astrology readings. Think about the way that I came into his, across the welcome mat and then got curious. I mean, obviously he did the work to find me, so that definitely made it easier. But if you've got those keywords embedded into your profile, you're going to be findable anyway, right? For both things. But I will give you an example of one client I worked with who just for the life of him could not figure out how to merge his two backgrounds. Totally different industry than anybody on the call, but he was a mortgage loan officer who had previously been a paramedic, so he drove an ambulance, he was an EMT, and he hurt his back due to an injury. I don't know, I think 6 or 7 years before I started working with him. And so he was trying to figure out what to say about himself on LinkedIn. Now, I was working with him back, shortly after the financial crisis kind of was starting, or right in the thick of it, I guess. It was probably 2009. And he was tempted to just take off the EMT stuff because he said, well, that has no bearing on me, being a mortgage officer. So it's just getting in the way. It just makes me look unfocused. Coincidentally, he also happened to have a really scary face. He was the nicest guy. It was a teddy bear, but his picture looked like something that should be on the post office wall or something. And I was like, Scott, and not Scott who's on the call, by the way, because Scott's a real teddy bear and he looks like a teddy bear. But I said, Scott, if you don't tell people where you were for the last 6-7 years, they're going to make their own assumptions, and you kind of are giving a glare into the camera, like they might think you're in jail, and that's definitely not going to help your brand. So what I encouraged him to do is create some kind of a really catchy kind of professional tagline, and we called him the emergency financial expert, the mortgage emergency expert. Because of his background as an EMT, that's well prepared him to take very seriously his clients' issues. He used to be the guy who showed up when you called 911. Now in this time of financial emergency, he's got your back, So it was kind of cool, and people started to remember him that way, So
And how far back are you doing like experience? I know you kind of touched on that with one of them, but I mean.
Yeah, that's a multi-layered question. Unfortunately, I'd say there is a fair amount of ageism, that still continues to happen.
Right.
Fortunately, however, for those of us that are running our own businesses, which I think are most of the people on the call, that becomes really not such a big deal. People
Right.
want to pay for experience. They don't really care. They're not paying for your health care and stuff like that. So it's,
Right.
whatever. But so I don't really mind showing my age on social media. And I think whatever depth of experience that I've got that supports what I'm trying to do today, I don't mind including it. I really don't. So I don't know that it's so strict as a resume is, because a resume, you're really thinking that an HR person is going to sit down and they've got to read that entire document. Nobody has to read your entire LinkedIn profile. I mean, basically, I think I'm embedding those keywords just to bring people to my profile. And then I'm
Right.
fully expecting that they're going to scan, not read the whole thing. And I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Kind of answered in a roundabout way, but
Right. Well, I just, the last 20 years have all been kind of the same skill set, but I have other things that I've done, but they precede that. So, does anybody care if you did it, 30 years ago? You know what I mean? Is it relevant?
I think again, if you put your client that you're trying to reach first and foremost in your mind, then it's really about them. I mean, it is about you, of course, as well. But if they don't care about it, you don't think anybody would care about it that you actually want to attract, then maybe you don't need to say it.
Right.
But I bet that you didn't do anything for zero reason. There probably is some value. And I think that's a good way, again, that we can kind of work with one another. I really encourage, people on the call and people within the Co-Thrive Collective and the Time Bank to offer this, service to one another. Hey, if I didn't know you, let me just read your profile and I'll tell you what I think you do. If people say, yeah, actually, that's not what I do at all, or that's not what I'm trying to portray. Oftentimes, somebody completely new to your brand can give you that beginner's mind, kind of review that it's really hard for, let's say, your mom to do or your spouse to do, because they know us, just too well. And they see things that aren't there. We definitely see things that aren't there. We see things that, we know what we mean in our head, but it's just not that clear on paper.
Right.
Well, I was going to just chime in that I'm doing a different thing than what I was doing. I've kind of done a career switch. I used to be a wetland scientist, and I haven't been a practicing wetland scientist for over 15 years. And now I'm doing farm education. And I guess there is some overlap. I mean, it's farm and nature education. There's a little bit of overlap, but I find that people are much more willing to entrust me with their children, knowing that I have this sort of science background. They think that that's a plus.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of, poo-pooing that or downplaying it, Kathy encouraged me to put my letters, which I always say stand for piled higher and deeper, but she encouraged me to put my letters on my email tagline and to, don't try to hide your creds, even if you haven't been using them.
Yeah, because they're still you. I mean, you ultimately are the bait. And you don't really know. I mean, if Austin would have said, I'm trying to quote unquote sell her a tarot card reading, and he was like, well, she doesn't care about crowdfunding, how does he know? If he was just a tarot card reader, I probably wouldn't have, I would have hit delete very quickly. but just the combination of things made me feel like it was a delightful, just surprise to find that message. And I really felt, heard. I felt like somehow he knew me. And so just think about how good that could feel. Like, again, I'm going to go back to the sacred selling. We've all got something to share. And, that mindset really is the biggest thing. And I think too often we just don't honor our own gifts. So think about what your client wants. And then, once you're in tune with that, I think your mindset is going to be right to start looking for that overlap. You'll know a little bit more easily what things need to be highlighted and which things can fade. And I'll go back to that circle. If you've switched into a very spiritual role, and at one point you were doing something that was like very non-spiritual. I mean, maybe you don't want to like try to bury that. Maybe you want to own it, but that's definitely not going to be the thing you're going to be playing up in the fish zone, right? You're going to probably say, okay, that's part of me, but it's not part of the overlap, right? I just think these circles actually really help me get oriented toward, what's important, what's not. And I actually wrote a little tip that will be coming out in an ebook to support and celebrate the next book I've got coming out with Powerful You Publishing. And I just kind of wrote about how I healed my approach to business by changing the method, some different things than what we're talking about today. But I really feel that everything that you guys are doing, everybody that's called here, you are doing something sacred. And part of that sacred work is selling, because if you've got all these gifts and nobody knows about them, to me, that's a travesty, and so I want to kind of walk you through getting out of your own way, removing those blocks, whether they're, the mindset or the technical or the, just how we talk about ourselves, what are those keywords, right? So look for upcoming sessions soon. And I would love feedback if you guys want to, email me, give me a message on Facebook, whatever. Tell me if you thought this was valuable. Tell me if you'd like more of it. You can actually comment right on the Facebook event if you'd like. But I will be uploading this to YouTube. And I would love for members to be able to share this with friends that you think could also benefit from taking a new approach to selling what they do. Because I think 2017 for me is the year I really want to shine a light on finances. I just think we don't talk about money enough. We don't acknowledge that we need to bring in income. And I think by just actually elevating it to a different level, we can make it fun, we can make it sacred, and we can make it shared. So that's all I've got. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody just to see if anybody's lingering. Anybody want to say anything? Agnes, we haven't heard from you.
Oh, just to say thank you. It was good. And I haven't really updated my profile, and I used to know how to search for like people that might be harmonious, and I haven't done that in years and years, and I forgot how to do it even, but
yeah, they have kind of changed things up a little too, so it's not all you. They've definitely changed the interface. I think they are pulling back a little bit on the things that they still make available for free in that advanced search. But that's probably a good refresher too that we could cover, is just what can you do with the tools that are there. We can't change what is, but we can maximize, what we've got. So great to hear from you. Anybody else? If not, I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up and let you get on your way. But happy selling, guys, and please invite others into this circle so that we can just, share the gifts and think about what you want to do through the time bank to help one another.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.